Sonderkommando, a German word for special command unit, has been used in a number of contexts as it involves the Holocaust. Jewish prisoners kept alive during this time were ordered to perform a wide range of activities for the functioning of Nazi death camps and World War II efforts. And prisoners chosen to serve as Sonderkommandos specifically were forced to take up tasks related to the disposal of gas chamber victims at the risk of their own life if they were carried out with non-compliance or any semblance of challenge. Hello out there, welcome back. My name is Christina. This is the place where we gush about the films that we love and try understanding the ones that we don't. On today's agenda is the 2015 Hungarian film entitled Son of Saul. It was directed by Laszlo Nemes. It was written by Nemes and Clara Royer. During World War II, a Jewish worker named Saul is at the Auschwitz concentration camp, and he is trying to find a rabbi to give a child a proper burial. I will eventually get around to explaining why I'm seemingly in a room made for developing photos. But first, we're going to get into the point of view that Son of Saul endorses, and what this represents and means for its main character. At the risk of stating the obvious, this is Saul, and he is portrayed by Giza Rohrig. Son of Saul's world building depends on illusion to a degree, and it is indebted to its balance of the first and third perspective. Much of the time spent with Saul features the back of his head, in addition to the blurring of things in his peripheral that are particular to his job, such as corpses. This is neither a preliminary measure or a shallow attempt at censorship, as it personifies the extent to which Jewish workers had to ignore the humanity of their fellow inmates to stay on task. Even when Saul's face is in clear view, Rorik's features are affixed with a powerful hint of stoicism that aren't spoiled with repartees. This is impressive not only because of the gravity of his performance, but because this was his feature film acting debut and he hadn't acted on camera since the 1980s.
Fried, Ella.
And that brings us here. Just when you think Son of Saul is busy enough, it starts incorporating subplots related to rebellion that might otherwise seem included for dramatic purposes. I don't think this is the case. Just take what's going on in this clip, for example. Saul is receiving a package of gunpowder that's been smuggled in by a prisoner named Ella. I would argue that Ella is a stand-in for a woman that was actually imprisoned in Auschwitz named Alla Gertner. And the scenario they are preparing for is a reference to a moment of insurgency that's very commonly associated with Sonderkommandos. More on that in a second. The most important thing to appreciate about these interactions is that willingness to incite insurrection when the cost of doing so was very clear. The threat of murder was very commonly used as a disciplinary tactic, and Son of Saul knows better than to lean into a narrative that is overtly optimistic when it comes to its character's chances of survival. That's just something to keep in mind before calling its ending, which I won't spoil, a cheap shot. Something I've seen it referred to in less savory terms. Now, the rest of this analysis might seem a bit scatterbrained, but everything that gets said will be related to either the moment of insurgency that I just referred to, or the formative nature of both Nemesis and Saul's heritage.
Tempo!
On October 7, 1944, and after months of preparation, one prisoner in Auschwitz accosted a Nazi officer, saying little more than "hurrah," and struck him with a hammer. The SS guards on duty then found themselves surrounded by other captives that were brandishing weapons. Despite the best of efforts made, only 3 SS guards were killed and approximately a dozen were injured. Suspected co-conspirators were punished either immediately or later on following an internal investigation. 451 Sonderkommandos were killed the day of this revolt, and Gertner was executed by way of hanging on January 5, 1945, at the age of 32. Hungary in general has a complicated relationship with concentration camps, much like the one in which Saul is confined, owing to a pattern of denouncement on behalf of its leaders when it comes to cooperation of any kind with Nazi Germany. As written by Dr. Volten Wadge, who served as a historical consultant to Nemes in developing Son of Saul, this denial is incongruent with the knowledge that over the course of 8 weeks, from May 1944 to July 1944 specifically, Hungarian authorities set a European record by organizing and carrying out the expulsion of 437,000 Jews. A majority of these Jews were deemed unfit for labor of any kind, and as such resulted in many elderly and disabled prisoners being killed upon their arrival via gas chamber, as was the case with a majority of the women and more than 100,000 children that were additionally deported. Their possessions were additionally sifted through and stolen upon inspection after the fact, with the split-second tangibility of worth being what largely separates Saul's likelihood of dying from that of his fellow prisoners.
Ne boncolja fel a fiút. Hagyja így.
Nem. Raus. Rokonod? Akkor is. Nincs rá szükséged.
De a főnökének van.
Hova valósi vagy?
Ungvárra.
Ugyanolyan rab vagyok, mint te. Este kapsz 5 percet, hogy egyedül lehess vele. De a végén ugyanúgy elég a többivel. Mi a neved?
Oszlander. Saul.
In the spirit of contextualizing what you all just watched, Saul has just finished an expected cleaning of a gas chamber with a very significant caveat. He happens upon a young boy that has survived the gas chamber, who is then killed by a Nazi doctor with demands that an autopsy be performed by him. The boy is brought to a doctor that is named Miklos Niesli, and his performance of this autopsy is interrupted by Saul's plea that he take the boy and give him a proper Jewish burial. Now, get a load of this. This premise might seem a little ridiculous, but it is actually rooted in historical account. A man by the name of Miklos Niesli was born in Hungary on June 17, 1901. He finished a medical degree with a specialization in forensic pathology in 1929 and mostly practiced in Germany until he migrated back to Hungary in 1940. His family was sent to a Nazi camp in 1942. Niesli was transferred to the Auschwitz concentration camp in 1944, and he was expected to report directly to SS officer and physician Josef Mengele. Under his direction, he mostly performed autopsies and experiments on twins. However, he also handled the bodies of prisoners that were either murdered or believed to have died from infectious diseases. This was all done with the intent of gathering evidence that would implicate and support the claim that Jews were an inferior race. One day, as fate would have it, Neasley was summoned by a Sonder commando to attend to a young girl that had actually survived a gas chamber. Despite his best efforts to keep her alive, this girl was eventually found and shot dead. This attempt at keeping her alive says more than it receives credit for, and especially so in this context where Jewish prisoners were encouraged to treat others with some amount of indignity. And that's without even taking into account how much their shared heritage must have contributed to a sense of camaraderie that was ultimately exploited. In Neasley's case, his story is a little happier. He was liberated on May 5th, 1945, and reunited with his wife and daughter shortly after. He never again worked with a scalpel following the conclusion of World War II. All that to say, it would be fair enough to extrapolate some prevalence of guilt certain categories of prisoners were primed to possess as a whole. And Son of Saul is at the very minimum about atonement or some sense of obligation to make amends when presented with a rare opportunity. In Saul's case, this is much more explicitly connected to tradition and spiritual background, as funerals in general are dictated by these in specific context. And his desire to honor a little boy's spirit speaks to an amount of redemption that is unfathomable to the neutral gaze. Though not taboo in modern times and not prohibited by any known text, for thousands of years Jewish law has gone far to suggest that burial in the ground is the only acceptable option for those of the Jewish faith. So one can only imagine how additionally challenging it must have been for Sonder commandos to cremate a Jewish companion regardless of how close they were to them. This explains and informs not only Saul's almost deranged focus, but is formative to the clockwise fashion in which he moves along throughout.
Baruch Ato Adonai.
To be effectively on autopilot throughout all of this is quite the feat, which brings us back to the importance of perspective. Sonder commandos tried hard to take pictures of camp-related conditions, and Son of Saul brings brief attention to this. This category of worker could expect to be kept around longer than your average Jewish worker. However, their believed expendability was reinforced largely with impunity. They were killed in groups regularly so as to prevent them from contributing to any independence-related causes, regardless of the capacity in which this was even possible. Which brings us here. Many pictures were taken inside of these camps. However, only 4 depict the process of mass killing via gas chambers, in Auschwitz specifically. The first 2 show a group of Sonder commandos burning and disposing of bodies. The third shows a group of women being stripped naked in what is safely presumed to be the final moments of their life. The fourth is the most perplexing, as it shows the warped shadows of trees. It is supposed that this is the result of a nervous photographer being so afraid of being caught that they took a picture without special aim or care. These photos, few as they are recognized by historians as resistance-related gestures, and the narratives they inspire work to eclipse a living population's understanding of what was lost during the Holocaust. Son of Saul and stories like it are truly a grain of sand curated from a desert of trauma. However, they are recollection and preservation efforts that should never be taken for granted. If you made it this far, thank you so much for watching. As usual, questions, comments, and concerns are encouraged and welcome below, in addition to suggestions as to what movies I should be watching and analyzing next. My name's Christina, and I'll see you next time. Bye.